how to access college as an undocumented student.
Yeah, so I just put my contact information there. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you do want to reach out, please do. It's ana.gutierrez@rcc.edu. And whoops, can you move to the next? Yeah. You can go to the next one. So there is a connection between your legal status and higher education. Your legal status can determine your eligibility to study in the United States. So for example, if you're applying outside of the United States and trying to get like a student visa, like you'll hear a little bit more about, or if you're already in the United States, it can impact your eligibility for federal financial aid. It can also impact your eligibility for in-state tuition or resident tuition. So some statuses are not able to get resident tuition no matter what, and some statuses can eventually get that. So it's really just important to know what you're able to qualify for. Some statuses like B1, B2, people come here on a tourist visa, and then they want to become a student afterwards. And I always just like tell people to be really careful, because then you're kind of shifting what the intention of that visa was, and then you may eventually interact more as an undocumented student on your campus, because you are not eligible for all of the programs like the federal financial aid or the resident tuition potentially. So I just kind of wanted to give some of that disclaimer. I also have a really in-depth slideshow for later use if you want to go onto the LAJF website, and it kind of goes into detail about all of those statuses. So I do want to say though that your legal status should not make your college experience negative. Obviously there's a lot of barriers, especially if you are a student who is undocumented, but there are a lot of resources on college campuses, especially nowadays, that try to serve students who are undocumented, students who are first generation, get creative with like different study abroad options, things like that. You can go ahead and move to the next slide. So for today, the way that I'm going to define undocumented is if you came to the USA legally, but you have overstayed your permitted period of time and you're now out of status, you would be considered as a student who is undocumented. Or if you did not come to the USA with a legal status and you don't have one now, then you would be considered as a student who's undocumented. Something people sometimes don't realize is even if you're in the application process for a legal status, that doesn't mean you've been granted the benefits of that status yet. So for example, someone applying for asylum, still in that application process, has a different financial aid eligibility than someone who's been granted asylum. You can switch to the next one. DACA, this gets kind of complicated because a lot of people, once they see that they have a social security number, they think that they have a legal status, and sometimes will accidentally misrepresent themselves with the school, or the school officials will accidentally misrepresent them as a resident. So it's really important to kind of understand what DACA is, and it's deferred action. So if you do have a social security number, you may have a benefit because you can fill out some of the forms online, like college applications that students who don't have a social security number may have to ask for a paper application for. But it also may be better in your situation to do a paper application. You'd really have to talk to the college just to make sure that you're not accidentally applying for any federal aid, because that is something that a DACA person is not currently eligible for. I'm gonna switch to the next one. Whoops, I had to put a timer on my phone, but then I messed it up. Also important to understand what you do and don't qualify for, because sometimes people will enroll you in something if they don't understand. So just recognize that there are potential immigration consequences if you enroll in a program that you don't qualify for. A lot of college campuses have someone who specifically knows international student services or undocumented student services. So I would recommend finding an advisor that specifically understands that information before continuing. But if you do qualify for benefits, I do see a lot of students who are really hesitant to get any benefits like financial aid, even if they do qualify, because they're worried about immigration consequences. So I just want to say that it's 100% your decision what you want to do. Currently, there isn't anything saying that if you do qualify for financial aid that you will have an immigration consequence. But if you do choose not to use it, you often have to disclose that specifically to the college because we may enroll you in programs automatically. If you do qualify for financial aid, though, you do have a right to use it. You can go to the next one. The FAFSA is a federal application for student aid. So that is literally the line of applying for federal aid. If you do qualify for federal aid, you can use the FAFSA. If you don't, then the FAFSA is maybe not the best decision for you to fill out. All right, next slide. A lot of people ask about parents who are undocumented. They may discuss this later in the FAFSA segment, but basically the FAFSA is about what you qualify for and the money is for you. So if your parents don't have a legal status, they can still sign the FAFSA physically. They can't e-sign it because you need a social security number to e-sign it, but they can still mail the application. And the FAFSA is not supposed to be asking about the legal status of your parents, as long as you personally have qualified. School-based financial aid, a lot of schools have financial aid that's separate from federal aid. So I just said, like, people can't qualify for federal aid. That doesn't mean you don't qualify for any aid. There's just one segment of aid that you would be ineligible for. So if you are concerned that your immigration status would prevent you from getting federal aid, look for schools that have self-identified as welcoming institutions, whether it's a student advisor specifically for undocumented students, a sanctuary school. Some schools have titles like Hispanic Serving Institution because they have a lot of students well, Hispanic students in that situation, but that usually also means they have a lot of undocumented students that they're accustomed to serving. Or even just schools that have really strong international student advisor programs like Red Rocks. Doesn't have, no, Red Rocks doesn't have a specific category like that, but we do have international student advising that covers that range. Next slide. So state schools oftentimes have cheaper tuition if you are able to say that you're an in-state resident. However, in order to qualify for resident tuition, you need to be able to have an immigration status that allows you to be considered a resident. Usually, in general, you have to live in the state for a certain period of time. So not necessarily just in the USA, but in that state for a certain period of time, or have gone to high school in that state or something like that. There are some categories that are still not going to be able to apply for resident tuition, even if they've been here for years, like F1 students, and that's just because of their immigration status. Switch to the next one. So for undocumented students, every state and even deeper, every college has their own rules on how they're going to classify someone as a resident or not a resident. So it's really important to figure out if the school offers a break for undocumented students, and then you can kind of start connecting to the right people and figure out, okay, what benefits do I specifically qualify for? I'm going to switch to the next one. A lot of private schools don't offer in-state tuition. They don't have that same limitation. So you pay the same price international or not prior to getting your big financial aid package. So this is also an option if someone feels like they can't qualify for in-state tuition and their out-of-state tuition is too expensive, then maybe a private school may offer a better package. I'm going to go to the next one. So since I said the rules change state by state, I want to explain a little bit for Colorado. If you want to switch down, the Colorado Asset Bill, I don't know if you can kind of read this graph, but in Colorado, students can qualify for in-state tuition regardless of their legal status if they also have been living in the United States for a certain period of time and went to high school here. And they go to college immediately after. So you can't go to college 2 years after graduating from a Colorado high school. You no longer are eligible for the asset program. But they do have a little grace period for people who graduated a long time ago, who wouldn't have been able to just retroactively change things. Colorado offers in-state tuition to some students even if they don't qualify for asset. But the benefit of asset is that you also qualify for the it's a stipend / scholarship that Colorado offers called the College Opportunity Fund, and it's basically a tuition discount. So they are giving students who specifically qualify under asset this extra benefit. What is unfortunate about it, though, is it really doesn't reach all of the needs of students, and it doesn't matter if you have DACA or not. You have to qualify specifically for asset, and it also doesn't work for people who otherwise wouldn't get residency status. So if you have a legal status that won't let you be considered a resident, then you wouldn't get asset regardless. So even if you're an F1 student who went to high school in the USA, you can't use that and then get asset. So it really changes state by state. This is a little complicated of a system, but I just kind of want to give you a general idea that if this is something you want to look at, to really go and talk with someone who can help you investigate which states are going to be the most welcoming, which schools are going to be the most welcoming, and which programs are going to be most affordable. I'm going to switch to the next one. There are obviously private scholarships. Those ones usually don't have restrictions in the same way as schools or federal monies do. It's just whatever the private donor wants to do. So I would highly recommend investigating those. If you're an international student or a student who doesn't qualify for something that requires you to input a social security number, then just try to find an organization that really fits your goals. So if an organization serves refugees, they may have scholarships for refugees. If an organization like CRS, right, may have scholarships that are unrelated to some of those other restrictions that you would find. Yeah, switch to the next one. And I would just highly recommend that instead of saying, okay, I'm only gonna apply for a school that's gonna give me resident tuition, or I'm only gonna apply for a private school, to really apply to different places and see what the final package is gonna be for you. Here's a bunch of links and resources for you. Oh no, fine, you can go to the next one. One final option that can be really affordable for people is community colleges, and I'd be happy to speak more on this. But an affordable education with excellent tracks, community colleges are open access post-secondary institutions of learning. So a lot of people get worried that their TOEFL score isn't high enough, or that they can't figure out how to take the SAT from their home country, or maybe just their current high school grades are really bad, and they are worried they're never going to get into college, or get scholarships. That's not true. So this is an option for you to avoid using some of those high school transcripts and standardized test scores. Get into an institution that you can easily transfer credits to whatever your dream school is, or you could even stay at a community college, and community colleges often have bachelor's degree. Red Rocks Community College has a physician's assistant master's degree. So it's just another option to add to your plethora of things. Or if college is getting really expensive at your institution of choice and you want to take community college classes on the side, like during the summers, that's an option too, to help save money. And that's all I have for you right now.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much, Anna, for sharing that with all of us. I think if I may just add a word, I'm not sure how much this would apply to the people who are here with us today, but if you guys have friends who went to camp and would benefit from this information, you think, please share it with them. We thought it important to add it now because it's very it's vital information to for people to be able to access their education. So thank you, Anna, for sharing your expertise with all of us.
Yep, absolutely. So